The Pac-12's adding 4 Mountain West schools. Does that mean they're done with the Big 12 and the ACC? Nope.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Realignment, which never goes away, coaching carousel, transfer portal, and every single game that you need to know about. We've always got you covered. This episode brought to you by friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. So we'll talk about Florida, Texas A&M, and pick every game in the SEC with Brandon Olsen of Locked On Gators. And the Apple Cup is going to be spicy. It's going to be spicy. Who gets it done in Seattle this week? We'll talk about that with Roman Tomashoff of Locked On Huskies. But we start with what is once again the biggest news story in college football. The Pac-12 is going to poach 4 teams from the Mountain West: Boise State, San Diego State, Fresno State, and Colorado State. I'll get to the logic of it being those 4 for now in just a moment. But one question that I think comes out of this is, does this mean that Oregon State and Washington State, or any of those schools, particularly Boise, Fresno, and San Diego State, and less so Colorado State, does this mean none of them could ever find their way into the Big 12 or the ACC? I don't think that's the case. Is the Big 12 more likely? Yes, to an extent, because if Clemson and Florida State leave, maybe there's a backfill component. I don't know how likely that is. I think the Big 12 is more likely. But the key, and Drake Toll and I have Locked On Big 12 talked about this yesterday, the key to this particular question is no, Oregon State and Washington State are not getting into the Big 12 or the ACC right now. That does not mean the answer is going to be no forever. That does not mean the answer is going to be no in 2030 or 2031. In the early 2030s, that's when Oregon State and Washington State could find their way into the Big 12 or the ACC. But that's if those conferences still exist around that time. Because what you could have is an absorption into 2 mega conferences. And what you were trying to accomplish between now and then, if you're Oregon State and Washington State, and this logic applies to those G5 schools as well, that are now going to be part of the Pac-12 and, one of the premier Group of 5 conferences in the country. What you were trying to accomplish is ensure that which is an if there is an AFC, NFC type structure in college football, you make yourself available and included into that shift. Because that's what it feels like the next major one will be after the ACC figures out what it's doing with Florida State and Clemson and where they end up moving. That's where the next shift is going to be, and that's where you're trying to include yourself. Now, let's say the 4 conferences stay together. Let's say, or separate rather. Let's say they stay separate, and Florida State and Clemson go to the Big 10. Everybody else stays put. You've got the SEC, you've got the Big 10, you've got the ACC and the Big 12 kind of in that next tier. Can you find your way into the Big 12 of the ACC? Yes. Yes, you can. Because what about the history of realignment in the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years? Indicates that this stuff ever stops. Schools are seeking validation. Schools are seeking money. Schools are seeking credibility. They're always trying to make moves, and moves have always been made. So if an opportunity presents itself where the ACC or the Big 12 are in a bidding war or are in a territorial dispute of sorts where they're trying to figure out how to gain an advantage over the other, and they have to go and add teams in order to do that, you need to put yourself at the top of the list. So it's why I think this move makes so much sense. And I've talked about it for a long time. It does make a lot of sense because all you can do is play the hand that you are dealt. And this is what Oregon State and Washington State have been dealt. So what you're now trying to accomplish is build the best league you can, win as many football games as you can, and games like the Apple Cup this weekend or the Civil War in Corvallis, Those are opportunities that you want to have on your schedule every single year. Washington State beating Texas Tech. Those sorts of things matter. Individually, it doesn't holistically make the selling point, but over a 10-year running period, you want to demonstrate that you can compete at the highest level of college football. And to do that, you make the best conference you can, you get as many big-time games as you can, and give yourself the best possible access to the college football playoff that you can find in this landscape. So for Oregon State and Washington State, I think they're making the right move. And why are these schools the right move? 2 reasons. And Colorado State's the outlier. I'll get to them in a moment. When you look at the track record of success on the football field, and remember what I talked about, making the most competitive and the strongest and the deepest league that you possibly can in a new look Pac-12. Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State. No questions about it. Those are the top 3 options. Those have been the most successful. Those have been the winningest brands in the Mountain West for the last 10 to 15 years. So those 3 were no-brainer additions. How did they land on Colorado State? That's where the other factors come into play. At Big Ten Media Days, I asked Commissioner Tony Petitti what the criteria are when evaluating expansion. And he talked about the multifaceted approach that the Big Ten takes, and every conference, I think at some level, has used that sort of mindset where they say, okay, we want to prioritize football success. If, we in this instance being the Pac-12, we want to prioritize football success. Well, these schools give us that. Well, then what's the next factor? Well, is it a geographical fit? Or maybe you're looking at television market. Denver is a top 20, top 30 television market in the country. And yeah, Colorado is getting most of that viewership, but is Colorado State a bad option? No, they are not. And Colorado State has made more commitments to football and facilities and athletics than you would probably think on the surface. They had a team in the NCAA tournament recently in a Mountain West League that was pretty loaded going into the NCAA tournament, and that doesn't matter quite as much. But what does matter is the ability for their brands to be elevated by their athletics programs. And so if they're going into the Pac-12, that's going to elevate their brand at some level. And I think that over the last few years, though Colorado State doesn't have a football season where you look at it and go, oh my gosh, they were incredible. They were so good. They could be a decent team this year. We'll see how they perform against Colorado this weekend. They've done enough on that front to justify getting more favor from the Pac-12 because of the television market that they could be in. The reason, and I saw a couple people shoot me notes about this, like, hey, why wasn't UNLV included? What about UNLV? Well, UNLV has a recent track record that's incredibly strong. I think they're one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the Mountain West this year. I picked them to go into Houston and beat the Cougars. They beat them 24-7. And Barry Odom and company have done a really, really good job proving that you can, in fact, win in Las Vegas. I wonder if there are ties between UNLV and Nevada that made the Pac-12 say, at the very least, we're going to put you on the back burner. Because the next move for the Pac-12 is we're going to wait to see what happens with the ACC. What happened? Because we don't know. We don't know. You can speculate from now until the end of time, and I have many a times on this very show, about what's going to happen there, where the teams are going to end up, who they're going to want to associate themselves with, where they're going to fall, everything under the sun. You don't know what's going to happen. But when you have this position of relative strength compared to what you had 3 days ago, you can now afford to wait because you have the foundation. You don't have the entire house put up, but you have the foundation and the windows are up and the paint color's been selected. Now you've got to fill the interior of the house. And as long as you have that foundation, you're going to have an easier time picking an interior designer who looks at the house and says, well, I want to go be a part of that and build something that's really good because I see the strong foundation. We're not going to have cracks in the ceiling. We're not going to have leaky faucets. Like, all of that's been put in place. Now we have to make the interior look really, really good. So that's why they don't have to hurry. The next news on the realignment front, which definitely was planned to come out during rivalry week for the Civil War and the Apple Cup, and I think is pretty good marketing from the Pac-12, quite frankly, they can now wait and say, okay, even if there's a less than 1% chance, it is worth waiting to see what happens in the ACC if anyone comes available. If not, maybe UNLV is a Mountain West team that they've got on standby. Maybe they've got contacts in the American Conference that nobody knows about. We don't know. I'd pick up the phone and make the call to American Conference schools at the very least and make them say no, and then go forward from there and evaluate who the next strongest Mountain West schools are. Maybe look at some Sun Belt teams, see if they'd be interested in making the jump if there's a fit. And you can, again, speculate from now until the end of time who that might be. Texas State, I think, would be one of those potential options. But it never goes away. It just never goes away. But as I said to begin this segment, is the ACC and the Big 12, are the ACC and the Big 12 completely out of the realm of possibility for Oregon State and Washington State? And secondarily, the top 3 Mountain West schools that join, Boise, Fresno, and San Diego State? No. It's just not going to happen in the short term. So you have to make the best. Think now and 2030. That's what you got to do. Strengthen your football brands as much as you possibly can between now and 2030. This is a great first step to doing that. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. Let's go back to football, shall we? We're going to pick every game in the SEC. How badly does Billy Napier need a win? Pretty badly, I'd say. That's coming up next. First, let's talk about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They have got superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors, they have you covered. They have over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. You know what's available to all customers everywhere? LinkedIn Jobs. That's right. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That is why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free, which is a super awesome price. LinkedIn isn't just a job board, folks. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional when you go to LinkedIn. 2.5 million small businesses, they're using LinkedIn for hiring with good reason. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. If Texas A&M rolls into the swamp and blows out the Gators, are they just going to show Billy Napier the door? No, probably not. Right, Brandon Olsen of Locked On Gators? That's not going to happen, right? Boy, that's a long pause. That's a long pause.
I don't think it necessarily would, but there is a section internally that is kind of next loss he's out, regardless of whether or not it's a blowout. There is a feel that could be the outcome. I don't buy that. I think that at the earliest they'd wait until a bye week. Like maybe you lose this week and you make the decision that he's gone, and then after Mississippi State next week when you have a bye, you make the move. But yeah, things don't feel awesome in Gainesville right now.
No, not exactly. And Texas A&M comes into town in semi-wounded animal mode. I don't know. I don't think A&M fans have as much pressure put on this first season for Mike Elko as Florida fans do for the third year of Billy Napier. But I just wonder about that. Like, you hear the sarcasm in my voice. It's only 60% sarcasm for me, because if you, in your first 3 games, Brandon, have 2 blowout losses to programs that you don't have an excuse in year 3 to be that far behind at home, I can see him making that sort of that sort of shift and going, you know what, we need to make a change here and make it very clear that we're starting our coaching search, and then we go hire Lane Kiffin, of course. But on this particular game, Brandon, how does Florida win?
I don't think they do.
Really?
I think they. I'm not saying that this is a game that I'm like, oh, Florida's definitely going to lose this, but I just think matchup wise, I don't think it's great based on what we've seen. Like, one thing with Texas A&M, Colin Klein, his run game's really creative. He uses counter quite a bit, uses pin pull scheme, and we saw Kentucky last year run counter quite a good bit, and Ray Davis had almost 300 yards. And until I see it from this coaching staff that they can properly prepare these guys for it, I just can't be confident in that. And then, of course, Texas A&M's defense, I know they haven't really produced pass rush-wise the way that they've been expected to yet. Florida's offensive line, specifically the right side, has been really horrendous this year. If there's ever been a get-right game for someone like Nick Scorton, who lines up typically against the right tackle, this is that game.
Yeah, and Scorton, the defensive end for Texas A&M, I don't think had the matchup or the performance that people were expecting in the matchup against Notre Dame. He's going up against an inexperienced offensive line in some spots, and look, Notre Dame did enough to win the football game, and it's not as if you didn't notice that Scorton was there, but he certainly didn't go off for 3.5 sacks and 8 quarterback pressures the way that you might have thought on paper. Before we get to the score prediction for every single SEC game this week, Brandon, Gators, Aggies in Gainesville. You're picking Texas A&M. I'm going with the home team here. I don't know why, because I don't really know what to make of either of these teams, but I'm going to go Gators 24-20.
I picked on the crossover with Andrew Stefaniak of Locked On Aggies. I picked A&M 31-27.
Okay. Well, even Brandon's not confident in the Gators, and if he's not, then who is? Me, apparently.
Well, I need the coaching staff to show me literally anything. Just anything. Just
tough times in Gainesville. Tough times in Gainesville right now. Let's go rapid fire. Round the SEC. Bama at Wisconsin. Any danger for the Crimson Tide?
No, I don't think so. I think Bama's got that one pretty easily.
I do as well. I don't know if they cover the 16. I do think they win by at least 10 points there in Madison. LSU, South Carolina, Tigers need a win in a big way here. I think LSU goes into Columbia and gets it done.
Yeah, I think so as well. I know South Carolina's looked good early on, but early on, teams will make adjustments, and LSU's a better team than you faced so far. LSU's line pretty decent. I think LSU wins it. I think LSU covers as well.
Yeah, I have that as well. 31-17, I've got the Tigers. Speaking of Tigers, how about Missouri against upstart Boston College? Who had them in the top 25 by week 3 on their bingo card, but top 25 matchup in Columbia, Missouri?
Missouri won there easily. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I even need to explain that one. Yeah. So
I won't be shocked if that game's a little bit closer, but like the Bama-Wisconsin game, I think the Missouri Tigers win by double digits there. Oklahoma hosting Tulane. Boy, Oklahoma did not look good last week against Houston, and Tulane, as a really high-level Group of 5 team, Sooners have to be careful here.
I still think the Sooners win this one, but I don't think they cover the 2-touchdown spread.
Yeah, I think that's a bit high. I think it's a bit high. I think Tulane can push them even in Norman. They have to get ready for Tennessee because that's going to be a wildly entertaining football game. We already talked Texas A&M, Florida, UAB, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Wake Forest, Texas, UTSA, Vanderbilt, Georgia State. Is the SEC going to lose any of those football games? Because I don't see a loss in there.
I don't think so. I don't know why, but something about the Vanderbilt game to me is just like they're going to Vanderbilt the hardest they've ever Vanderbilted. it's like it's not even that I think they'll lose the game. I'm just like, it's Vanderbilt. I feel like they'll do a Vanderbilt type thing. But Clark Lee's got his guys ready to go.
Yeah, he does. And by the way, Vanderbilt could have the earliest over-under win total hit of the college football season if they win at Georgia State this week. They had a win total of 2.5 on FanDuel. They're a 10.5 point favorite, sitting at 2-0 at Georgia State this week. Georgia, Kentucky, I've seen the Wildcats push the Bulldogs before. That is not going to happen here.
Nope, not at all. Georgia's going to handle that one easily.
I don't even know how close Kentucky is capable of keeping it. Look, college football doesn't always make sense because if you think, okay, Georgia's a better team than South Carolina. South Carolina just went into Lexington and dog-walked the Wildcats. Georgia shouldn't have any problem here, but if I told you right now, Brandon, they have issues at all in this game, what do you think that looks like?
I honestly, the only thing I could see happening is Georgia players taking the mentality of, well, South Carolina just dog-walked Kentucky. we should be able to go in and dog walk Kentucky. Like that's the only thing that I would see happen. Like I'm just completely overlooking them kind of thing. Like we saw with Georgia and Kent State 2 years ago, I think it was, where Kent State kept it close for a long time. But even then, like I think dog walking again, or wildcat walking more appropriately.
An SEC team in need of a win, the Auburn Tigers, looking for a bounce back. Do they cover the 28-point spread against New Mexico at home?
I want to say yes. New Mexico, not great right now. And Auburn, I think after that stinker against Cal, you kind of need to show out a little bit. And so I think that Auburn will be motivated to do so.
I don't think Kent State has any chance in the world of keeping up with Tennessee in Knoxville. Vols favored by 49. It's one of the biggest point spreads in all of week 3. And look, if they play the way they did against Chattanooga in week 1, then that could be a 56 to nothing ball game. I doubt we have any disagreement there. Toledo, Mississippi State. Bulldogs coming off a loss in which they were down big against ASU on the road. They fought, they scrapped, they clawed. I think that's a good sign for Jeff Levy's team that they didn't quit when they were down big on the road. They come back home against Toledo, 11.5-point favorites. I think just a win feels good for Mississippi State, right?
You're out of your mind if you think I'm picking against Toledo. I will die for that school. So that's the helmet, the tattoo. I'll die for Toledo. So I'm taking Toledo all the way.
The Rockets have got a pick against an SEC school here on Locked On College Football.
I was there when they beat an SEC school, okay? I was there when they went in and beat Arkansas on the road.
Okay. So we've seen it happen before.
Yeah,
we'll see if it happens once again. That is every SEC game coming up this week, and that's Brandon Olsen, Locked On Gators. Brandon, thank you for stopping by.
Thank you.
So let's go to the Big Ten / Pac-12. Oh boy, how about that Pac-12, huh? Washington State. This Apple Cup is so spicy for so many reasons. And the Huskies better be on high alert. That's coming up next. Before we get to the Apple Cup, let's get to Factor meals. Fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, which is how I feel this time of year, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. They have 35 different meals, more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week. You'll always have new flavors to explore. You can crush your wellness goals this month with dietitian approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50. That's the link you go to. Once you get there, use code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Go check out Factor Meals today, the best meal prep that you will find. The Apple Cup is this week. Yes, it's strange, but at least the game is being played, and boy, it's going to be fun. That's Roman Tomashoff, Locked On Huskies, joining me here on the show. At the very least, there's a major hurdle in this game for Washington, and that's that Washington State has way more to play for in this matchup. Not just because Washington left for the Big Ten and left Washington State behind, but in light of the Pac-12 realignment news, they are just further trying to solidify their case to be at the highest level of college football. They've got the attention. There's going to be a spotlight on this game, national television. That's something that Washington's going to have to overcome. I think the Cougs are going to be as riled up for this football game as they can possibly be, and that's in a rivalry game.
Spencer, I don't know about national television exclusive on Peacock is this week's game.
Well, but it's nationally accessible. Anyone can get Peacock. Anyone cannot get the Pac-12 network.
Yeah, shout out to Comcast and Xfinity, by the way, for not letting us get the Big Ten network either. But no, so I certainly hear your point. But Wazoo has looked good over the past couple of weeks, but they played against a severely depleted Texas Tech defense. And again, they did look good. I want to say that. But Spencer, do you know how many yards per game Wazoo's defense is allowing through 2 games this year?
Wazoo's defense? Not off the top of my head. I'm gonna get. I'll take a guess. 334. 334.
470.
Okay, that's not great.
No, it is not great. That is 124th in the FBS so far this season. And Washington's offense has, Jed Fish said that first quarter that they played offensively looked like the Bad News Bears. So anything that's a slight improvement from that, when Washington has not scored a point yet in the first quarter of this season, that's certainly going to be a point of emphasis for them this week. But combined with a defense that had 7 sacks against Eastern Michigan this past week, I feel really confident about the direction the Huskies are heading into, where there's still certainly some things to work out along the offensive line, but it has shown massive improvement from week 1 to week 2. And I think we're going to see that again this week. So against, a secondary with Wazoo, like I just said, that defense as a whole is allowing 470 yards a game with Will Rogers, who has been really efficient so far, throwing for 511 yards and 5 touchdowns through 2 games. Jonah Coleman, who's looked fantastic. I really like what I see there. And let's also not discount this, Spencer. Do you know what the score of when Jed Fish took on the same, a very similar Wazoo team last year was?
Let me think. Arizona, Washington State. Oh, it was so long ago. You're going to have to jog my memory.
It was 44-6 Arizona. They did a really good job of fighting.
Oh, that's right. They went into Pullman and boat raced them.
Yep. So Jed Fish knows what to do against the Jake Dickert scheme. I really love what Steve Belichick can do to shut down the scrambling ability of John Mateer, where I certainly think he's going to get his yards, but I really am confident about what the Huskies have rebuilt with over the course of the offseason. And you know me, I don't make very hard predictions here, but I certainly feel good about the direction that this team is heading in.
So before we hopped on to record, Roman, I told you that I'm coming into this game picking Washington State unless you can talk me out of it. And I have to say, you have made some compelling points. We'll find out at the end of the segment if I ultimately get there. I do stand by the motivation factor that there is way more to gain for Washington State in this game than Washington. But I've been impressed with John Mateer. He threw the ball really well in week 1 against Portland State. He ran the ball really well last week against Texas Tech. Throwing was not quite as proficient, which I think is a concern, but he's got a couple of good receivers, 2 games under his belt. I think the offense looks pretty darn good. I don't think Washington State's defense is as bad as the numbers indicate. I think a good number of those yards came in the second half against Portland State when the game was already decided, and it was just kind of an up and down crazy affair. But point taken, this is the best, I think, offensive collection of talent they will have faced so far. And I think Texas Tech has got some good weapons, but Baron Morton, Will Rogers, that's kind of a wash. There are a couple good weapons down there in Lubbock, but I was impressed with Washington State's defense last week against Texas Tech. So when you look at this Washington offense, how do you think they should or need to attack this Wazoo defense?
I think that they can throw the ball a lot. I think that they're going to drop back, throw it 30, 35 times maybe, where, I gave you the defensive numbers as a whole. They're allowing 288 yards per game in the back end through the passing game. So I really like this collection of weapons, as you said, where, Giles Jackson has been targeted 16 times this year. He has 16 catches. Denzel Boston has looked the part of the number 1 receiver. And after being shut out in week 1, Jeremiah Hunter had a really nice day against Eastern Michigan. He had 5 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown. So this is a really nice collection of pass catchers for Washington. And that's without, talk about the tight ends where, not having Quentin Moore is a big loss for this team, but more so in the run game because he's just incredible run blocker, where Dickert DeGraff has looked the part as freshman tight end. He's got 3 catches. 2 of them are for 30-plus yard touchdowns. So he's been really explosive at points of time. And I think that this Washington passing game has a whole lot of weapons that it can utilize in whatever way that it wants to against a defense that's shown that it can give up a lot of yards through the air.
Each of the last 2 years this game has been played, it has been tight. It has been competitive. And I think Washington State this year is a lot closer to what they were the last couple of years than what Washington has been over the last couple of seasons, which I think is why the point spread has come down. It's now Washington minus 4.5, last I checked, according to our friends over at FanDuel. And I think it's going to be a competitive game. It's in Seattle, but it's not at Husky Stadium, which is a little bit strange, but understandable, I suppose. It's odd. It's really odd. It'd be like if Oregon went up to Portland to play at what was once PGE Park. It's like, well, I mean, they got a stadium right over there. But I understand the neutral field factor now that this is a non-conference rivalry game. So let's get to our game predictions, and we'll start with you here, Roman. Does Washington win this game again, and how tight do you think it is?
I think Washington does win this game again. I'm going to say they cover. Here is the extent of the predictions that I make, as you know, Spencer, but I do think they cover. I really like this defense. I think that one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is Steve Belichick does a really good job at taking away opposing strengths. So saying he likes to say, all right, we dare you to beat us this way. We're going to make you play exactly the way that we want you to. And for John Mateer, that's finding a way to take away his scrambling ability. I think that they find a way to put a safety down in the box and have him spy John Mateer, whether it be, Cam Broussard, Cameron Fabiculon, and maybe Justin Harrington sees a little bit more playing time this week. I think that he's done a really good job of finding ways to eliminate opposing strengths over the first couple of weeks. And if they can keep all the runs between the tackles, I like Washington in this one.
What is the biggest key for Washington to win this football game? And conversely, if Washington were to lose, why do you think that happens?
I think the biggest key for Washington to win this football game is to keep John Mateer in the pocket. Keep him from scrambling. Where if they want him to beat him with his arm, that's fine. I like the secondary. I like Thaddeus Dixon. He's had a really good day. He had a really good couple of days in his first two games. Elijah Jackson has been their highest graded corner as a backup, and Ephesians Prysock. Spencer, I know you're a big fan of that guy as well.
Yep.
So I would say that keeping him in the pocket, forcing him to throw is the best way to do it. I like this pass rush. Like I said, had 7 sacks last week. Conversely, Washington has shown that it can have some trouble defending the run when it gets bounced outside the tackles. They haven't done necessarily a great job in containing and setting the edge over the first couple of weeks. So I think that if Wazoo is able to find a way to break some runs outside the tackles, that they can all of a sudden pick up 10, 12, 15 yards on some of those. And that could cause some problems, in my opinion.
Have you won me over?
Have I?
Have you pulled me over to the Washington side? The Arizona game from last year, which was in Pullman, by the way, and one of the more shocking results of the year. I think it might come down to which coach wins the chess match from that particular game. Does Jake Dickert make the adjustments, or can Jed Fish exploit the same sorts of things he found in Jake Dickert's defense a year ago? If this were in Pullman, I'd stick with the Cougs. I'm going Huskies here. I think this is a wildly entertaining and fun football game. Wildly competitive. I can see this going either way. Washington 28-26. I think they beat Washington State. Yep. I think it's one of those sorts of games where it gets weird and funky, but you know what? I've picked against Washington State once this year in the non-conference, which is of course what Washington State is. A classic non-conference battle. Obviously.
Just like Oregon State.
Just like Oregon State. That's the way that these things go now. We'll see if I have to apologize to Coug fans once again. That is Roman Tomashoff, Locked On Huskies. You won't get an apology out of him most likely. But for me, Cougs fans, you will. You will if Washington ends up losing the football game. Roman, fun time as always, my man.
Spencer, as always, thanks for having me.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Enjoy the weekend. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.